Hello, 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 ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to VUX World with me, Kane Sims. Excited for today's conversation. We're going to be talking to Dmitry Shapiro, who is the CEO of MindStudio. And MindStudio is an AI automation platform, an AI application building platform, if you like. And we're going to be talking to Dmitry all about the future of AI automation, the future of agentic AI agents, and we're going to be talking about the future of work and the future of business. And before I welcome on Dmitry, I'd like to give a shout out to our presenting sponsor for this episode of VUX World. It is Intel. Now, the best thing that you can do for your business today is to get it prepared for the evolving challenges of tomorrow. And one of the ways that you can do that is to combine cutting-edge processes with integrated performance management. And when it comes to managing your laptop fleet that your business uses, your employees are using, you can look no further and do no better than Intel Core Ultra and the Intel V4 platform. Essentially, the Intel V Pro enables you to manage all of your fleet of laptops remotely, and the Intel Core Ultra processor is a specific processor that is designed specifically to manage AI workloads. And so regardless of the size of your business, whether you're big or small, when it comes to renewing your fleet of laptops, definitely take out Intel because the Core Ultra processor is something special. It improves productivity, battery life, team collaboration, the whole 9 yards. There's over 300 specific AI features that the Core Ultra processor can handle today, and obviously it's been improved upon and features added all the time, essentially. And so if you are looking to renew your fleet of laptops very soon, if you're in IT and you're responsible for that kind of thing, check out Intel Core Ultra and also check out the Intel V Pro platform. I mentioned there, it allows you to manage your fleet remotely. There's a whole bunch of other capabilities and features that it allows to make your life easier. So if you are interested in that, you can check out vux.la/Intel, vux.la/Intel. Thank you, Intel, for sponsoring VUX World. All right, let's get on with the show. Please welcome, ladies and gentlemen, my guest for today, Dmitry Shapiro. Dmitry, welcome to VUX World, my friend. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me.
No problem.
Doing great.
Good. I'm just trying to find you here. There you are. Found you. Good. I'm glad you're doing great. Thank you. Thank you for spending the time with us. Really appreciate it. We've actually had a bit of a look at MindStudio in recent weeks and months, and it looks like a pretty decent platform, which I'm sure we'll get into in more detail shortly. But before we do that, maybe let's be useful for you to introduce yourself to the audience if you could. I know you've got a lot of experience, Google and MySpace as well, which is really interesting. So you've been in technology for a long time. Let's give us a little bit of an update in terms of like your experience and what led you to MindStudio.
Yeah, these days I describe myself as an old nerd. I started writing code in 1984 after watching this movie War Games. And then studied electrical engineering, got a degree in electrical engineering, but I've never done a day of it. Have always done software. After college, actually went off and had a number of sales jobs and sold various telecommunications products, and then started at a company called Fujitsu in 1995 and built their web team till 1999. Then I went on to start two venture-backed companies. One was a cybersecurity company called Aconix Systems, raised $34 million for that in venture capital, had over 2 million deployed seats in enterprises. After that, I started a company called VO Networks, which was a major competitor to YouTube, raised $70 million in venture capital there. Then I went on to be the chief technology officer at MySpace Music. And then after that, I went to Google for 4 years, from 2012 to 2016, and ran product on a bunch of products there, and then started this company here in 2016. And here we've raised $36 million in venture capital, and we're in market with this product MindStudio. Yeah, that people can find at mindstudio.ai.
Nice.
So I'm an old software nerd.
Who knows how to raise money by the sounds of things. Wow, that's brilliant. So 2016 is quite a while ago then. Certainly before the whole sort of generative AI revolution, if you want to call it a revolution. What was the purpose of MindStudio in 2016?
Oh, sorry. MindStudio started 2 years ago, but the
Ah,
company that built MindStudio started in 2016.
right.
We
Okay.
built another platform called Koji, which was a platform that allowed software developers to build web applications dramatically faster than sort of other ways, and built that up and ended up selling that asset, Koji, to a company called Linktree. And 2 years ago, started MindStudio. So MindStudio is 2 years old.
Right. Fair enough then. So 2 years old, so more or less 2 years to the day of the release of ChatGPT. Did it coincide with that?
Yeah. So I AI has been around for a long time. And like, for example, all the recommendation systems that you see for, video product, et cetera, are driven by machine learning. And so I started working in the field during my VO days. This was in, 2006 to 2010, where we built a recommendation engine. In fact, we had a recommendation engine before YouTube had a recommendation engine. And then, at Google, I ran product on these 3 machine learning teams that were dealing with all of this data that Google has about, people, because we were trying to stand up Google Plus. So I was in charge of things like people you may know, you may like, feed ranking and things like that. And so it's been clear, to me at least, for over a decade, that obviously there's like plenty of uses for machine learning that are very valuable. But when ChatGPT came on the scene, it became very clear that now we've entered sort of a dramatic new phase of how we should think about, AI. In this generative AI thing. And so it became very clear to me and Sean Thielen, who's my co-founder and CTO here, that this was going to be really exciting. We had some ideas that how we could contribute and make things better. And that's how MindStudio was born. And basically kind of the insight was that like it's great that you've got all this amazing sort of capability in the cloud, and all you need to do is type some prompts to it, and it will respond back to you. That can't be the right way to leverage all of the power of generative AI, is like typing commands with our thumbs to it. And while there's plenty of use cases for conversational AI, this is great. There are, I think, even more sort of exciting use cases for things that have nothing to do with chatting with AI, but sort of leveraging AI capabilities in the right ways inside of business processes to make those business processes dramatically more efficient and productive and digital transformation, basically a new phase of digital transformation of organizations, now injecting intelligence where before you'd need humans sort of sitting around and doing things, and oftentimes doing sort of like mundane things, moving data from one SaaS platform to another SaaS platform and injecting a little bit of like transformation. Well, you don't need to do that anymore. Humans can do like much more interesting things than that. So anyway, that's how MindStudio was born.
Right, interesting. So you mentioned there that typing with your thumbs can't be the most effective way to interact with these kind of generative AI systems. What would be an example of a perhaps a more, not necessarily appropriate, but a more idyllic way to interact with these systems based on your experience of building MindStudio?
Yeah, so the majority of things that people build with MindStudio, and by the way, now there have been over 100,000 of these AIs built and deployed, in all kinds of organizations, government, enterprise, mid-market SMBs, practically every industry. And all of these implementations are different. Why? Because all organizations are different and have different needs. And so kind of the proposition of MindStudio is that, anyone in the organization, actually, you don't even need to be technical to do it, can sort of very quickly learn to build these AI applications using MindStudio. And you learn that by watching some YouTube tutorials. and kind of watch half an hour of YouTube tutorials. And overall, you start to understand, oh, I know what I can do with this tool. And then you can kind of look at whatever it is that your organization does or your team does or that you individually do. And you will start to realize, again, now that you know what you can do with MindStudio, you start to realize that there's a bunch of things you've been doing manually that you could just spend the next half hour to like build this automation. And then you don't have to do those things manually. And that might save you, 15 minutes of time a day, but might save you hours of time a day. And again, that's if you're looking sort of at your own workflows, you'll start to find those kinds of efficiencies. And then you'll start to look at kind of, again, your team or organizational workflows. And you will realize that there are things that can just be automated or that you can create, again, rapidly create in like half an hour, new tools, new applications for yourself or your employees that would be sort of custom made for them, kind of fit like a glove. And because of that, are sort of much more useful and dramatically sort of improve their productivity, happiness, etc. And so again, some examples of that might be set up an automation that looks at an email inbox or a database that when a new customer, messages you from the website or creates an account or whatever, where before you might have had sort of humans trying to figure out like, is this a good potential customer? Who should I route them to? What information might still be missing, and sort of go back and forth and communicating with them and asking for more information about their business, whatever it is that you need. Well, now AI can just do all of that, and you can build that automation very quickly, and again, sort of do customer intake dramatically faster, or lead generation and prospecting, or lead qualification, or human resource. Again, it's like countless things. You can find a bunch of patterns on our website that were bubbling up of the things that we see people doing with it.
Interesting. You mentioned there that, and arguably this is kind of one of the goals of most kind of AI platforms that kind of build kind of a product around being able to build applications, is that the holy grail is the citizen developer, no technical skills required, drag and drop interfaces, low or no code. How sort of feasible, and because you referenced it there, that's the goal of MindStudio, how feasible is it to do that today, to be able to build a high-functioning, high-performing enterprise AI application without code? How do you kind of get around some of the perhaps customization requirements that might occur?
Mm-hmm. So I think it's valuable to separate, this term application, sort of unpack it. Mm-hmm. What are applications, right? Applications have some input-output, so humans can use them, right? They've got some menus, they've got some functions that do some, various activities, and then they're sort of wrapped in that thing. And that's, in the past, to build all of that, you needed to write a bunch of code. But now, again, once you start thinking about applications being kind of like these little bundles of intelligence, we call them, specialized AI workers. And that sort of implies that if you could sort of take a human and teach them to do a job, like sort of onboard them to your organization and say, you're going to sit in this seat and your job is to do this. Your job is to constantly be looking at this, at this inbox. And this is the inbox where, potential customers send us messages asking for more information. And then you're going to take that and you're going to analyze it, and you're going to do like all of these things. And so as long as you can explain that in just sort of plain English, that's what it takes to build applications that are AI-powered applications. It doesn't take writing code. Now, you may want to then take that little, again, intelligence bundle, that AI worker, and you might then want to integrate it into a bunch of your other, sort of tech stack, into your other applications. And there, oftentimes people use things like Zapier or Make, or again, sort of custom calls directly, API calls from these applications. And then you can call our agents via API and very easily integrate them into your stack. There, you either use, again, these no-code platforms like Zapier, Make, or MuleSoft, or whatever, or, one of your IT people needs to help you write, a simple JavaScript function, basically, that calls this AI. So there might be a little bit of code that's required in your organization to integrate this in, but like to create the AI worker itself requires no coding whatsoever. Has nothing to do with code.
Interesting. And so do you see then that, because now we have generative AI models that is essentially most of the time language in, language out, although that's obviously changing with multimodal models of video in and images in and all that kind of stuff. But a lot of applications tend to be kind of the way in which you instruct the models in terms of what it is that you need them to do is language based. Therefore, that reduces the need to code and therefore opens up the accessibility kind of requirement, I suppose, or the availability, if you like. So it's available to more people. But then you have like some, I suppose, not necessarily hobbyists, but developers more with technical kind of skills that do a lot of prompt engineering. And, if you were to read the general sort of sentiment around, LinkedIn and stuff like that, some people are on the fence of saying, well, prompt design or prompt engineering is not a technical job, whereas some people who are doing that right now say, well, actually it is a technical job sort of thing, and it's a developer's type of role. Where do you see the kind of whole, because it's not necessarily as simple as just writing text. You need to understand how to instruct the model, how to formulate your prompts and stuff, and how to test and make sure that they're doing the thing that you expect them to do and all that kind of stuff. Like, so do you see prompt design and prompt engineering as being, a developer technical requirement in terms of being able to do that effectively, or is it just a case of as long as you can write and you can formulate thoughts, then that's the main requirement?
Yeah, you don't need any development skills or talent whatsoever to get what you need out of AI models. If you break up the problem in the right way, and again potentially split it up into parts and say this part of intelligence is going to do this, and this one this, and this one this, and you build them individually, you connect them together. Where people get into problems is they try to, again, kind of create this like prompt that like does too many things, and therefore the AI gets confused, which makes sense. A human would get confused too. So you got to sort of break the problem up into pieces, and then you got to build the different pieces, and then you connect them together and they work. MindStudio specifically makes that much easier because, again, of our IDE, our development environment, that allows you to, create the workflows, the multi-step workflows, allows you to call AI models from those workflows. And for each part of the workflow, you might call a different model or other things. You might get data out of a vector database or out of a relational database. You might search the web. There's like many things that you could do in these workflows. When you're calling models, we allow you to compare them side by side, like many models, and call them all simultaneously and sort of get back results. And look for latency. You want smallest latency. You want high quality. And you also want, obviously, the lowest cost, because different models cost different amount. We let you sort of like do all of that in real time as you're building this. We allow you to debug your AIs and test them, and like many things that you need to do to make them perform what you need them to perform in the way you need them to perform. But again, that requires no sort of traditional code writing developer skills whatsoever. Yeah. They really don't help at all.
Yeah. And you mentioned there that sometimes people are trying to get the models to do more than they perhaps should. And I've definitely seen that happen where, some people have got a prompt that's like 1,000 words long, with the absence of any data that you might want to inject into that prompt that's dynamically coming from the application, so to speak. So one of the things that I've seen people do is they have to repeat stuff. They have to put things in capital letters to say, make sure you pay attention to this bit. And so for me, that's a symptom that you're asking too much of the model, and that really you ought to be, as you suggested, breaking the problem down, splitting it up into its constituent parts. And so my idea of kind of best practice, but again, I don't know if this is necessarily best practice, this is just kind of how we've kind of come to understand it, is that only ever ask a model to do one thing at a time, break everything up into a smaller problem as you can possibly do, and ask it to do one thing at a time. You were given a thumbs up there, which is a good sign, because the question is that what you would advise in terms of when you're building these applications? Break everything down into its smallest possible problem and have each kind of model or each prompt only solve one problem at a time? Or is there a threshold for how much you can ask these models to do? Because you read the media and people will say that these models are going to be capable of absolutely everything, and you just need to write one cleverly worded prompt and hey presto,
Yeah, and so the prompt you'd write is, build and operate a, multi-trillion-dollar company for me, and hit go, and it says, okay, I got you. I'll go raise money, and I don't need it. So yeah, look, I think there's obviously a lot of sci-fi sensationalism about AI and noise, and I think that's confused everyone. The way that we propose that people should look at AI, and this is again the way they're looking at it because they've built over 100,000 of these AI workers using MindStudio, is to think in building small things, right? And so that you can articulate clearly what one worker does, right? If you tried to hire an employee, and when you were onboarding them, you say you're going to do this and you're going to do that, and you're going to do this and you're going to do that, and you're going to put all these things together, they're going to get confused. But if you said all you do is this thing here, and then all you do is this thing here, and all you do is this thing here, and then the process goes you do yours first and go here, well, that's easy to describe, right? And so ambiguity is the problem of language, and the more you try to sort of pack into a prompt, in this case, the more ambiguity you're introducing. In an ambiguity, you start to have problems, right? But if you break things down to small pieces, then there are no problems. Then all of the models can do these things well. Some models can do them faster, better, cheaper. And then, again, fine-tuning those things becomes much easier. I'll give you another example. So one of the things we allow people to build are what we call AI serverless functions. Now, this specifically is targeted towards developers, software developers. So non-technical people can take advantage of MindStudio and build business applications and automations and all that. And then technical people, software developers, can get even more value out of MindStudio by leveraging MindStudio to build these serverless cloud functions. And so again, for developers will understand, this as they're listening, but obviously when you're building a software product, when you're writing code, you write a bunch of code and you write these things called function. A function is something that does something, right? And some functions are really easy to build, and other capabilities are much more difficult. One example of this is if you're building an application that has any kind of sort of user-generated content, comments, ratings, etc., you always also then have to build a moderation capability, because people will start posting all kinds of things that you don't want them to post. And because that moderation capability needs to deal with fuzzy things that people might say, it's really difficult to get computers to be able to moderate. But humans can do that easily, right? You can put any kind of human in front of a computer and say, when you get these comments, when people start posting, just look at them and decide, is this a good comment or a bad comment? Do we want this on our platform or not? That's trivially easy for a human to do, but extraordinarily difficult for a computer to do, right? And that's why, all of these, social networks, obviously, and other things have giant moderation teams of humans. Well, now it's trivially easy to build a AI serverless function that moderates, comments, for example. And so you can build this function itself without writing any code, because again, to build AIs, you don't need to write code, you need to write instructions. But then you can call that function directly from your code base in real time. And so whenever you get a new comment in your application, you make a call out to this cloud function, pass it the comment, and the function returns, is this okay or is it not? Right? Is it a good comment or is it not?
Right. So in that instance, just to clarify, what you're talking about there essentially is that the comment comes in, I would then send that comment via a MindStudio API to MindStudio, and then the application I've built in MindStudio will run through the process of determining whether or not it's a safe comment or not. And the response I get back from the MindStudio API is yes or no type of thing. That's what you're saying.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Another example of that is, when you're creating applications that allow people to sign in, to create an account, and they can create a username. Well, one of the things you want to do when they create a username is make sure that the username isn't profane, for example, right? Meets your terms of service. State of the art, before generative AI, was that you sort of maintain this like ginormous list of words, of naughty words. And whenever a new account would be created, you would search through that list and see if this thing was in the list or not. If it wasn't, then it's good to go. But again, humans are very creative. And so things always fall through the cracks. But again, Gen AI can very easily, you can create this function, for example, that says, is username profane? And it can say yes or no. And that's all it does. And because, again, it's super small, you can build it in literally just a few minutes without writing any code, and then integrate it into your app. And now that like very hard problem is solved by thinking of generative AI as just being this little bit of intelligence that you needed to complete a task. In this case, verify that the username isn't is appropriate.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And so going kind of a bit deeper into that kind of this whole concept of breaking things down into the smallest parts possible. Like let's imagine that the in your example there of the comments, that you want to basically filter comments, have a look at them, analyze them, and see if there's anything, dangerous in there. Now, you might have a list of criteria here, which is, let's say that you're a social media platform. You don't want anything that is going to, be a direct kind of threat to someone, for example. Perhaps you don't want something that is going to be, racist or whatever it is that you define. Basically, you're going to have a list of stuff that you want to look for. Mm-hmm. So, again, in that instance, the logic is that you build one application that basically just performs that one capability, which is take a comment, have a look at it, tell me if it's good or not. But behind the scenes, you're going to have a list of criteria, all the things that you want to look for. You're not going to necessarily have a massive, huge training corpus like you would do a machine learning solution, because the knowledge ideally is in the model already. You just want to explain the types of things that you want it to look out for. Let's say if you've got a list of 50 different things that you deem as an organization you want to look out for, is that something that you would recommend having one prompt that looks for these 50 things, or would you then split that down into 50 different prompts, chain them together, and do it that way? So when it comes to the actual, the specific job you're given the model to do, what's the best practice there?
Mm-hmm. In this example that we're talking about, all of this belongs in a single prompt. Mm-hmm. Because again, all of these are the same things. Think of it as a human. You had a human. You could have as many humans as you want doing things, or you can, and for each one of them, you can give them a task. Could you give one human a task to look at, any new comment that comes in, and then check these 50 types of criteria that you mentioned? Yes, of course you could. And again, this human isn't a human, it's AI, so it can work at inference speed. So it's infinitely more scalable than a human. And this thing is trivially easy for it to do. And so you don't have to break it up. If you, we're building an AI that has to do sort of many more different types of things that have nothing to do with, moderating a comment. And you said, oh, and I also want you to do this, and I also want you to do that, that's not related to this comment, then you should break up into a separate AI.
I'm with you.
Or a separate part of the workflow. Again, like we allow you to create these multi-step workflows, and you can even sort of create multiple workflows in a single AI, and they will expose, API interfaces. So you can make them, you can package them in the right way where they do many things, one AI, but each workflow sort of does one thing well. And that's the best way to break it up.
Yeah, I'm with you. So that leads on to the next question, which is, from what I've seen thus far, I haven't seen any capabilities that allow you to kind of perform quality assurance satisfactorily. I know there's a bunch of frameworks that allow you to do things like measure the relevancy of data retrieved from a RAG system and measure the accuracy of a response that's generated, etc. But what I haven't seen yet is, if I have that prompt in the example we're just talking about, which is the comment scraping and kind of filtering system. Let's say I have a prompt, and in there I've got 50 instructions, 50 things I'm telling it to look out for. Maybe they've got some degree of priority or what have you. Now, before I go live with that application, let's say that I'm Twitter, right? X now. Before I go live with that application, I need to test that application to make sure that every single one of those 50 things that are mentioned is actually picked up. So I'll need to run some test scripts that say, right, here's the first one I'm looking for. Run that prompt that lists all 50 against some data, that some of which has that kind of occurrence in it, some of it doesn't. And I want you to see how accurate it is at picking it out. And then you'd need to do that for all 50. Ideally, you'd want to do that with a mixture. So here's something that's like violates 5 of those things. How do you approach doing that? Because that one prompt can generate exponential test cases. And you want to, an enterprise of significant scale wants to make sure that the actual prompt is working at scale, not just test it on a laptop with a couple of people and there you go. So how have you, does MindStudio provide this level of testing and QA, or is there other things that you've seen that do? Because I haven't come across anything just yet that will enable that kind of scale.
Yeah, this is a very important question. So I'll give you 2 answers. One, today, how, again, people who've been building with MindStudio now for over a year. I mean, we've been working on it for 2 years, but we launched it last September, MindStudio, so just over a year. So people that have experienced the entire sort of workflow and found themselves using this in mission critical applications, the approach has been build the AI and then build a second AI that tests this AI. And so that's what they've been doing, is building a second AI. And again, you can build these in a matter of minutes, and then, they work together and test one another. In the next probably 3 weeks, we will be launching a new feature, a new capability inside of MindStudio, which is going to be called, I think, Evaluate. And what that capability will allow you to do is right inside of the IDE of the integrated development environment, where you build MindStudio itself, there'll be a new tab, and in it, you'll be able to push a button, and it will generate all of the test cases for you.
Nice.
So synthetic data generation to test your AI. And you can sort of upload your own if you want, but obviously this ability to push a button and have the AI test your AI is super powerful, and people have been asking for it. And so that's going to be around the next 3 weeks.
Brilliant. That'd be really useful, because back in the days of the kind of rule-based chatbots, that was always a nightmare, because you had to basically write a manual test script for every single potential avenue down that chatbot. And you would spend most of your, God knows how long, actually running tests. And like when we first started kind of building chatbots and stuff like that, the effort in terms of kind of like skill set, if you like, was always really heavy on design at the beginning, because once it's been built and it's been coded and it's been developed, it's a lot harder to make bigger changes without disrupting how everything works and hangs together. So it was like heavy upfront design, prototyping, testing, a big kind of upfront design scope and spec and stuff like that. Then you would go through the technical kind of development piece, which still would be substantial. And then the QA would be like this thing at the end. But the thing is, the QA at the end is that because you have a chatbot that does 50 different things and every user can take a different pathway down it, your test cases balloon. So it does take quite a while. It seems to me that like in this kind of generative AI landscape, in terms of effort spread across a project, there's probably less effort required on the design piece, because you can type in a prompt, test it, iterate it. So the development and the design is kind of the same thing. But the thing I can see being extended without a tool like you're suggesting is the whole testing and QA bit. And in fact, I'm not convinced that many organizations do significant testing and QA on this kind of stuff. Like, because I've seen prompts that, as I said, 1,000 words long. They've got a whole bunch of instructions in them, but no evidence to suggest that the model is actually adhering to each one of those instructions, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a huge area of importance on this kind of QA stuff. So I'd be definitely interested to see how that tool looks and all that kind of stuff once it's out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you reiterated it. When you start to think of AIs as being these small bits of functionality that you can then put into your various, workflows, processes, etc. It's much easier to build them. It's much easier to test them. Again, we're about to make it trivially easy. You push a button and it tests itself. And testing is obviously extraordinarily important when you're building applications that do anything meaningful. And I think that's been sort of one of the challenges of organizations that really sort of getting the value out of AI, adopting AI, is that they kind of don't trust it because it's called non-deterministic. Each time you run it, it might give you a dramatically different result, and you might not be able to understand whether that result is good or bad or whatever. But again, if the results are very small, is this good comment or bad comment? Well, that's very easy to both articulate what you want, what you mean by good or bad, and also to be able to test it. And so when you make things smaller, a lot of these problems with AI sort of naturally get solved.
How does MindStudio recommend things like the selection of a model, for example? Because a lot of the stuff that we're kind of talking about here, yes, GPT-4o is probably a good model to use for most things, and 75% of businesses are using OpenAI's models for their applications. But when you start having this thing running on 100 million conversations or 100 million applications and stuff like that, the cost starts to increase. Now, obviously, that cost will come down, but the question is, should you use a very large model that has the world's knowledge inside of it to do something as, I don't want to say the word trivial, it's not necessarily trivial, but scraping comments and sussing out profanity or whatever? Would it be a more effective and cheaper and perhaps a more accurate, consistent performance if you were to look at something like a fine-tuned small language model, for example, to perform very specific tasks? Have you got anything in the platform, or have you had any thoughts in terms of that model selection piece? I think everyone just defaults to OpenAI right now, and I think as people start to mature and businesses start to mature, I think model selection is going to become, a lot more important. Like, what's your thoughts on that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we first of all, MindStudio is model agnostic, so we support any model. Built into MindStudio right out of the box is integrations with over 50 AI models from OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, Meta, Mistral, etc. And then we also allow you to, if you're running your own model, some bigger enterprises or folks that are in like highly regulated industries may not trust the cloud and want to run inference on their own premise or in their private cloud, we allow them to connect to that just as easily. So we're model agnostic. We built into MindStudio is something called Profiler. And so when you're building your AI in the Profiler tab, you can compare for each step that, where you need to call a model. You can compare models against one another. And again, the dimensions you're generally comparing on is quality, who comes back with the right results the most often, performance, so low latency, and then price, and there's a difference. If you sort of look at media, there's the belief of we need bigger models, right? And waiting for GPT-6, 7, etc. But in practice, again, we find you actually don't need any of those models whatsoever. Smaller models oftentimes are the right choice. because they're faster. So they've got lower latency. They're much more fine-tunable if you want to fine-tune them on your own. They're much less expensive from an inference standpoint. And again, if you're building your own or fine-tuning your own, it's much cheaper to fine-tune it because it's a small model. It's sort of just like in hardware, right? In like computer hardware, you've got the CPU, which is kind of like a large language model. It's an extraordinarily powerful processor that can do, many, many different things. Then you've got kind of a GPU, which is a different type of a bit processor that can do a bunch of other types of things. But most things you find are these small chips, called ASICs. They're cheap to manufacture. They're much more easier to operate, require less energy, and are just much faster. And so it's clear that AI is going to follow the exact same pattern, that most of the work is going to be done by small models, not big models. You might want to then use a large model after, again, in your workflow, get the small models to do a bunch of things. And then when all of the sort of data has been compiled, give all of that in the last step to a large model. And that large model might do a good job of like putting it all together for like human consumption, if that's what you're building. If you're like building a sales collateral generator, right? You might use smaller models to do a bunch of stuff. And then once you've compiled all of it, give it to a large model and say, put all of this together so it feels right to humans. And so that makes sense. But throughout the process, you rarely need to use these large models.
Nice. I can concur with that, definitely. I can see that kind of being where it goes. And I suppose that opens up the question of, for the future of MindStudio. You mentioned their fine-tuning models happens. You can do that yourself if you want to and integrate it into MindStudio. Do you see a time at which perhaps some of that fine-tuning might be opened up to the less technically savvy, perhaps in a MindStudio kind of capability or something like that?
Absolutely. In fact, these questions make me wonder whether you've been able to read our internal documents. This is actually on the roadmap.
Yeah.
Like we haven't slotted it yet, but it's on the roadmap that you'll be able to, just like it's super easy for you to provision a new instance in like the Amazon cloud, AWS, and you want a new instance of, a server EC2 or storage or whatever, you just like fill out a form and the stuff gets provisioned for you. It should be just as easy for somebody to be able to provision a new, small model, and again, have it be isolated so it's just yours, so like a private cloud, and then to be fine-tuned for your needs. And so all of that can, we can do programmatically, and so we'll expose that as just a simple way for you to be able to do that, obviously without any code.
Nice. That would be ideal. I think that's going to be the thing that's going to really open up, I think, really finely tuned, high performing, effective to run and cheap to run, all that kind of stuff, kind of applications for businesses that I know a lot of which are struggling in terms of scaling using OpenAI specifically. Where do you stand in terms of the whole concept of AI agents and what you would define as an AI agent, first of all? Because I think that part of, again, we've mentioned media a few times. I think part of what you hear and read around AI agents is autonomous AI applications that can run off and complete tasks without human supervision, I suppose, is the simplest way of explaining it. But then a lot of what I see being used as examples of AI agents are really nothing more than generative AI peppered into some existing workflow automation. Like, for example, in Microsoft Power Apps, you've been able to build automated workflows for decades, arguably, or a decade, or however long it's been. It just so happens that those workflows have been triggered by something that wouldn't necessarily be classed as generative AI. And if you look at, I don't know, Salesforce or SAP or whatever, all of these platforms have workflow automation built into them, rule-based flows. If this customer belongs to this type of sized organization, then send it to this person. And if the deal size is that much, do this. And, as you receive a form that's been filled in on your website, if these fields equal that, then go here. If they don't, then go there. So there's these workflow applications that have been existing for a long time and doing reasonably well in certain instances. And I think that now that we have generative AI, we've got the ability to understand a lot more, like the email use case you were talking about. But the email use case you may use generative AI in order to understand the context of an email and extract some crucial information from it. But then you might then just feed that into an existing workflow that you already have that's working pretty well. So I suppose I'd be interested in getting your definition of what you define an AI agent as. Is it something that is purely generative AI from end to end, and it uses arguably nothing but Gen AI with some integrations happening? Or is it the combination of Gen AI with some of the more traditional rule-based workflow automation? Or does it not matter?
Yeah, I think I think it's as the space evolves, and because like so many people are working on it and are excited about it, a whole bunch of new concepts show up all the time, and agents is sort of like the latest trend. And the reason you're sort of struggling to define it is because it's quite amorphous in what people mean by that. And so I always tend to try to like simplify things in terms of not AI. Like, what is it that you're trying to do? Like, why are you building an AI agent in this case? Oh, I need an agent to do sales. Well, what does that mean? You need an agent to do sales? Well, it means I need the agent to, whenever new leads come in, I need the agent to sort of do lead qualification and, get a bunch of data, put things into a bunch of SaaS products that we use and sort of get it ready for a salesperson. Okay, fine. Well, so if that's what it is, you got to break that up into parts and build the things, the AIs that do that. And if you want to package them together and say that I'm going to call that an agent, that's cool. But it's still the same thing. Like, tell each AI what you need it to do. And we call them, intentionally, we call them specialized AI workers. It's to kind of point to, you don't need overly sophisticated sort of agentic things. You just need very simple things that do work. But if you wanted to call those agents, you could as well. And so I think it's just a way of fancy naming of a design pattern and nothing more than that.
That's a much better way of explaining it, because sometimes I see things and they're being referred to as agents, and it's like, that's just a typical kind of workflow automation that's got some capability to understand an input at the front end, whereas other things that you look at and you think, actually, that's something totally new. That's something that is like, the example that and again, maybe I'll use MindStudio to knock this up, because I've been talking about it for so long, and everyone who's listened to the podcast has probably heard this a million times before. I just am so time poor at the moment that I just haven't had a chance to even consider it, which is that, let's imagine this conversation is being streamed live to a MindStudio API. It's being transcribed in real time as we have it. And what's happening is that then this conversation is being sent, first of all, to a place or to a model that says, take all the topics out of this podcast and let me know what was discussed. Then it says, right, now we've got 5 topics that were discussed. We want to write a blog article about each of those 5 topics using the content from the podcast. So now it splits off into 5 directions, and we've got 5 different pieces of capability that will write the blog article off the back of this podcast. Then you've got something that says, right, write a description, a meta description for each of those articles, write the title, generate me an image in this format that's going to go alongside it. Create me a LinkedIn post and a feature for our newsletter where we're going to include it in the newsletter, etc. Do all that stuff, and then here's the APIs to the CMS. Here's the APIs to the newsletter. Here's the APIs to our social scheduling platform. Stick it all in there. Assign it to the person who needs to look at it and approve it before it goes out. And literally, without doing anything, we turn one podcast into a newsletter feature, a series of articles, and all that kind of stuff. So, like, that for me would be a good example of an end-to-end generative AI application, arguably, because you can't really do any of that without generative AI. So, I would call that a good example of an agent. But at the same time, the same is still true, which is that business processes have certain rules, and certain things that need to be followed and things that need to be done in order for it to be fulfilled. Lots of businesses have those workflows already in place. Like when Salesforce give their kind of example of their AI capabilities recently, and they said, look, you've already got the workflows already sorted. You just point this AI at this workflow and there you go. You've got some automation. So it's kind of like, I'm just a kind of one, confused, and two, frustrated at the whole kind of ephemeral or kind of inability for us to properly define what that means, whether it's automation in general that includes some generative AI or an end-to-end generative AI application like that podcast example I mentioned.
Yeah. So first of all, that podcast example you mentioned, you yourself could build in a couple of hours using MindStudio. That complete thing, including calling all those APIs and putting this in these third-party services. So that's really straightforward to do, and which is right crazy because that's a tremendous amount of work, right?
It's two people's work for a day or two a week,
right? And so like you could do that this afternoon and build that. And if you have trouble building it, go to our Discord and there's a bunch of people there. It's like really active. They'll help you build it. So no matter what, like you can build that in less than a day, and that's crazy. Now, if you want to call that an agent, that's cool. If you want to call that an automation, that's cool. If you want to call that, an AI, that's cool. But I think, again, all of it is naming, but all of it is the same thing. You articulated the things that you want done, and then you very easily built this, AI workflow. And there you go, you push a button and it runs. And by the way, then you can monitor it in real time. And you might say, I'm not liking the way you're writing these blog posts. I want to update that a little bit. Great. Well, go and change that, and it'll start writing it in these new ways. An example that I've been using, see if it like works here. It's like if we look at manufacturing, kind of over the last couple of hundred years, we went from specialized artisans doing the work using, let's call it, primitive tools. And then we said, well, if we just built better tools for those people, they would be more productive. And that was true. And so they started using better tools. And then, we came up with the idea of like, let's specialize people and then let's put them on this like assembly line. And we got mass production. And so you had, trained people with great tools and this assembly line that's moving. And so that became radically more productive. But if you look at a modern factory today, it doesn't look like that. It's mostly automation, right? It's robots doing things. But the humans are still there. So what are the humans doing? Well, the humans are supervising the automation and fine-tuning the automation and upgrading the automation. And so you could describe modern factories as being, automation-driven, human-assisted. But if you look at the modern office, knowledge work, on that same spectrum, where are we? We're still in this place where we're giving humans better and better tools. Those tools, we call SaaS. And we give them better and better SaaS, and we say, now you can do more. But the problem is the human. The human is the bottleneck. And so we need to leapfrog to automation-driven or intelligence-driven, human-assisted. And that's what MindStudio does. It lets you get there now. We can set up all these automations, and humans can fine-tune them and supervise them and upgrade them. And your whatever work you do, whatever your organization does, can become radically more efficient, effective. And I think this is really the only, meaningful competitive advantage in kind of this modern world that we're entering. It used to be the competitive advantage was, well, you had to find the best people and you had to give them the best tools. Finding the best people is extraordinarily difficult, keeping them and then having them operate. And then, you're always sort of in search for better and better tools for them. But now, again, these dynamics have changed. So it's not about finding the best people and giving them the best tools. It's about articulating a process, creating the automations, and getting great people to be able to supervise those automations and fine-tune them. And that's the competitive advantage, I believe.
Yeah, I agree. I think the challenge has been that in years gone by, when you were to look at automating certain processes, you were doing so with the previous generation of tools. And what that meant, that if you didn't, that's why change management is so important, because if you don't bring the organization along with you, then as soon as you go live with your new system, everyone will just fall straight back into the old habits, and they'll just start hacking that system in a way that suits them. And this gloriously efficient operation turns into exactly what it was, which is a lot of manual judge work. Whereas I think that what this opportunity in front of us provides us, I think, is the ability to rewrite what those processes and kind of like operational processes should be, get them into a form where they are the default way of operating that process, and then have, as you suggested, your people that essentially manage it and look after it and run it. So I think it's, and because it's exciting and it's a new type of technology and there's new platforms like MindStudio, it's kind of like you almost have an opportunity to sort of reset a little bit and say, right, from now on, we're going to do it this way, and that's going to be the default. Everything's going to go into this via an API, and it's going to come out of it via an API. Therefore, there's no manual work involved whatsoever. Your job now is to make sure that this thing is doing its job,
Spot on.
Yeah, there you go.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean then for the future of work? Because I know, I talked about this the other day, which is The Guardian had a headline recently, which is like 8 million jobs are going to be at risk and all that because of AI and this, that, and the other. And you've got some people who are kind of like, this AI stuff's going to take our jobs, and it's going to be this dystopian kind of future of people sitting around claiming benefits and doing nothing. What do you think it is for the future of work? I mean, we've touched on it a little bit in terms of the roles that people may be doing either now or in future, but what do you think the impact of AI on work is going to be, broadly speaking?
I think, like all major technological advances, especially in information technology, tend to change the nature of work. This too is going to do that. Now, this one is going to be, I think, an order of magnitude more disruptive than sort of prior things. But I remember when I was in high school, and again, I was hacking on computers. I was one of the only kids in my high school that was interested in this, and so my guidance counselor, on 2 or 3 occasions, I graduated high school in 1987, so this is in the 80s, suggested that a great career path for me was going to be a typist. This used to be a career, and his argument, and at that time wasn't not necessarily would have been good to argue, because I think it made sense, is that his argument was like, hey, writing things by hand is slow and blah, blah, blah. And so more and more things are going to need to be typed, and you can type already better than other people. And so what a great career, like bright future. Okay, so that's not a career anymore. And so yeah, so look, I think specifically AI-driven automation is going to dramatically change how organizations operate. And it will require different types of people to, with different skill sets to participate in that. And again, fine-tuning automation and strategically figuring out which way to point it and things like that. But look, with all new innovations, we get more productivities, we have more ideas, there's more opportunity. And so I'm an optimist. I don't think that this becomes sort of some kind of a thing that destroys all jobs and everyone's sitting on welfare. I think it creates countless opportunities for new innovation, for people to show up and build things. And again, in the past, building organizations, still to this day, is extraordinarily difficult, because again, you need to find a bunch of people, and you need to pay those people, and you need to get them to collaborate with one another and stay in sync. And like, there's heavy lift, and kind of the more people you get, the more overhead you create of getting them to work together. Teamwork is hard when it comes to people. But now with these, again, AI automations, an individual can simply take their own time and be innovative and create a process or processes create these AI workers to do those, and get new companies up and running extraordinarily quickly and inexpensively without the need for going and finding any additional people. Like solopreneurs become, multiple orders of magnitude more effective in what they're able to do. And so I guess many more people become entrepreneurs.
Nice. Or entrepreneurs as well.
Right.
Yeah, brilliant. Fantastic. Dmitry, this has been an absolute fantastic conversation. Such a pleasure to spend some time with you and get your perspectives. I think there's a lot in there to unpack and a lot for people to learn. And where can they go and try MindStudio again? MindStudio.ai, is it?
MindStudio.ai. Mm-hmm.
Brilliant. Fantastic.
Yeah, and if folks, I'm on LinkedIn and quite active there. And so if people want to ask me questions there, I welcome you to add me on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dmitry. Absolute pleasure. Thank you all for tuning in, and thank you to Intel for sponsoring this episode of VUX World. We'll see you on the next one. Thanks very much. Bye now.